whatever you heard, you had to adapt, and you did brilliantly. And then you grow up with that adaptation, a maladaptive coping mechanism, and then it's causing havoc in your relationships.
What are the common signs and or mistakes in a relationship that make them fail within the first year?
I think the biggest is not understanding that there are two main stages of love. And the first stage, which is called the romantic stage, it's really fueled by dopamine. And as you know, dopamine is about the future. It puts you in a motivational state. So in the very beginning, you're highly motivated to get what you want. Everything is about possibility. It's exciting. And after a period of time, and it shows that around 12 to 18 months is when there's a major change in the chemicals.
Wow.
And then you move on to the second stage of love, which is the companionate stage. And the chemicals change. So they're often referred to as the here and now chemicals. Oxytocin, serotonin. These chemicals suppress dopamine. These chemicals help you be grateful for what you have. It's about the present, because what you want in the future, now you already have. Now, the problem is when people don't understand this, they think, oh my God, something's wrong. Why is it that I don't feel butterflies anymore? And the reality is you just cannot rely on Mother Nature to do the work for you anymore. You actually need to build the skills of being able to cultivate intimacy, passion, desire. And I think a lot of people who don't know that, they just say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you.
The vast majority of a successful, healthy relationship is spent in that companionate stage, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if the passionate infatuation phase only lasts, what do you say, 12 to 18 months? Yeah, I mean, that's like a blip in terms of when you zoom out and you think about the big picture, and like obviously pair bonding, you aspire to be with somebody for much longer than 12 to 18 months, right?
Yeah, and I think that is, if it's a long-term committed relationship, you need to optimize for the right things. And I think because we are so indoctrinated into what love is, a lot of it is from what we were fed from fairy tales and media, that there's this like crazy chemistry intensity. So we think that in the absence of that, that means there's no love. But if you just keep optimizing for that crazy intensity, you might be getting yourself in trouble because you're trauma bonding. You are entering a situation where your psyche is recreating the trauma of your past. There's all these reasons why you get that 10 out of 10 chemistry. And so you might overlook people that might be very good, viable partners for you. And I always say this to my clients, someone who's really good at dating isn't necessarily the one who's going to be good at being a partner.
Wow.
They're different skill sets.
Fascinating. Can 10 out of 10, that subjective perception of 10 out of 10 chemistry, ever be a red flag?
For sure. And I work with a lot of people who have a history of choosing the wrong people, choosing unavailability or chaos or projects that they need to fix. And this is, in therapy and psychology, a common thing called attractions of deprivation. We're drawn to what's familiar. Our psyche subconsciously tries to recreate the scenario of the crime of our childhood in an attempt to change its ending. So if you had chaos, or a parent that had love just beyond your reach and you had to earn it by being perfect, then you choose people who can give you that same experience, not knowing you're doing it. And you're like, well, if I'm just really perfect, if I just do all these things, then I'll get that love I never got as a child. And those are the people you're going to feel that strong chemistry with.
Wow, sounds toxic.
Yeah.
Actually. So crazy. I mean, are there any common, I'm sure there are innumerable potential indicators and every relationship is different, but are there any signs that are more commonly seen in relationships that just tend not to make it?
Yeah. So I think people optimize, again, it's back onto what you're looking for, right? If you're optimizing on things that don't matter, and they did do a big study on 10,000 couples, and they looked at the data of what makes a happy relationship, and how should you choose a partner to optimize your happiness. And they found that there's like the shiny qualities that actually don't matter in a long-term relationship. So looks, height, money, enjoying skiing together, those things, they matter in the beginning. You get this rush of like, oh my gosh. But then after a while, you adapt to those things. So they don't give you that same jolt of excitement anymore. You adapt, you're like, oh, that's baseline now. And so the things that actually do matter are things like someone who's conscientious, growth-minded, share similar values, share a similar vision to you. And if you go and date someone where it's just, based on chemistry and because they're this tall or they're this hot, great, explosive, great sex, and that is not enough glue to keep a partnership together in the long term.
But if you have all those overlapping the indicators that are more likely to predict a successful relationship, and on top of that, you're super attracted to your partner, the sex is amazing. I mean that isn't necessarily that's not harmful to the relationship.
Definitely
right?
not.
Yeah.
No.
That's like just icing on the cake.
Right. But I like to look at it this way. So for the chance of a partnership to be able to be healthy and last through time, I see it as 4 different pillars that are absolutely necessary. It's like this house is built on this foundation, and one pillar is chemistry and connection. The other is compatibility. And I'm not talking about you like the same hobbies. That actually doesn't matter when you look at the research, but it's shared values, how you move through time together. The third is timing. The perfect person at the wrong time is the wrong person. And the fourth, which a lot of people overlook, is mutuality. You need 2 people who are mutually invested in growing and building the relationship.
Super interesting. Timing is a big issue. It's I mean, that's something that where I feel like that's the variable that tends to be it's like shooting a moving target, right? Like, I just feel like, at least in my own life, I've, the timing, it's either not working for me timing wise. I'm just in a place where I'm in like a phase where I'm particularly career focused, or for the other person, maybe they had just gotten out of a relationship and they're emotionally closed off, or maybe looking for something just that's more surface level. Are there any, like indicators in terms of how to find somebody who is has that shared mindset about timing, has that sort of maybe a more synchronized with you with regard to like that window?
Yeah. So how do we de-risk it so that there's good timing? I think people are communicating in their words, their actions, and their non-actions. And I know even personally myself, I would say I'm totally open for a relationship. I was single for 4 years, and I kept, screaming it off of like the rooftops. And I would have friends that would try to set me up. And I actually had one who showed me the photo of this guy when I was like, please, like, who do you have to set me up with? And he shows me this picture, and I was living in New York that time, and I had this whole thing about never dating anyone in finance. I'm like, no finance bros. And I looked at the photo without saying a thing. I was like, finance bro. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so.
How can you tell? Wearing a suit or like what was it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just his like posture and this look on his face that looked a little smug. And I said no. And a year later, we match on Hinge. And at that time it showed if you had a mutual friend. So I called up my friend. I was like, hey, it says that we have a mutual friend. Do you know this guy? And he's like, you dummy. I tried to set you guys up.
Damn.
And he's now my boyfriend.
Wow.
We've been together for 4 years. And it's so funny because that photo was after he went skiing for the first time on the bunny hill, and he kept falling. And this was after he had a crazy day. He was exhausted, and he was just like sitting back on the chair. And I thought he was a cocky finance bro, but he had just finished skiing the bunny hill. So I think, this is an example of sometimes we say things, right? We could say, I want marriage, I want family, I want commitment. And what you're doing is actually not. A lot of what we're doing is subconscious. We might have blockers. So you need to observe and watch and see someone through time and experience. Is there an alignment in what they say and what they do and what they don't do?
Are there any like verbal red flags? Because today we live in a world where people are dating, I think, more and more via the apps. Obviously, like your relationship is the product of one such app. Are there any like text or verbal cues that might indicate that somebody's not aligned with you in timing wise?
So I know this sounds very simple. I'm not looking for a relationship. And unfortunately, more of my female clients take that and be like, oh, you're not looking for a relationship right now. Let me just be amazing and like, be nurturing and be so pretty and all these things. And then eventually you'll be ready.
Wow.
No, if someone is consciously saying, I'm not ready for a relationship, I'm not looking for one, don't prioritize them in your life as someone you're trying to fast track a relationship. I'm not saying cut them out. I think that we are in a culture right now that is so great, boundaries, but there is no gray area. But that means you can deprioritize them in the other awesome opportunities and people and like amazing life that you're building.
Yeah. Is that an appropriate question for a first date? Like, what are you looking for right now?
No, absolutely
It's not.
Jesus Christ.
It's too intense, right?
Your first date is only to determine, am I having fun? Do I want to see this person again? Do not be like, are you going to be my future baby daddy? Are we going to have a ashram in Bali? Like, don't future trip, because when you do that, you are objectifying that person and you have a plan in your head and you are using them as a means to an end. Do you fit in this plan? And if so, I will continue this. And if you have this mentality of trying to find your person on that first date, it changes the energy. There is a pressure to it. The other person can usually feel it when they're being conquested. And I think that a spark that could have turned into a flame could be easily extinguished because of that energy.
Damn. So it's like, what do they say on first dates? Don't talk about politics, religion. Don't ask what they're looking for.
I agree. Do not talk about subjects that will have a heated debate.
Yeah.
And the reason is because of this. When you have one date with someone, and if you were to have like some crazy argument about politics, or if, I don't know, you were to get food poisoning and puke on the table, that's your only data set, right? But if it's been 10 dates and you puke on the table, but you've already established emotional connection, you're like, oh, and they donate to charity, like all these things, that's like 10% versus 100% of the data that you have about someone.
Yeah.
So again, have fun. That's all your first date is meant to do.
I love that. I quote you almost on a regular basis, and your concept, the concept of future tripping.
Yeah.
Which you alluded to earlier. Can you, remind my audience, in case people haven't listened to your first appearance on the show, what future tripping is and why it is so treacherous of a game to play?
So I'll use myself as an example because this is what I used to do. I would go on a date or two with someone, and the amount of how much we like each other is even. It starts off even. And then what happens is in between dates 2 and 3, I've picked up things that he's said, that he loves Bali. Okay, I love Bali, right? Like whatever it is, like they like reading books at cafes. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so in between dates 2 and 3, I've gone home in that week and I'm like imagining our children, us walking on the beach, this thing we're doing in Bali together. And like, while I'm doing this and I'm like in my mind, I'm feeling the chemicals, I'm getting dopamine. I'm feeling this chemical reaction that gets me bonded. And it increases how much I like this person, right? I've created a projection in my head. So by date 3, he's just having date 3 with me. I'm like married, with 2 kids, like we've traveled the world together, and my energy is very intense. And so what I've had multiple times afterwards, when someone wouldn't want to go on another date, they're like, it just felt off. And I never understood that, because they don't know what actually just happened.
Yeah.
But because I like fell in love with you 10 times and you just wanted to order a pizza.
Yeah, and it's you've raised the emotional stakes for yourself.
Yes.
So you're increasing the risk of disappointment. You're setting up all these expectations.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they're just showing up to have a drink with you.
Yeah.
It's wild. Do both genders, would you say that both genders do that? I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I definitely do that. I future trip. And what was that you offered it like a really powerful antidote to when this happens?
So I think it's both genders. So just so you understand also, some people who future trip, it comes from childhood where maybe there was chaos And it was a survival mechanism, which was to just disassociate and go into the imagination and create these magical worlds as a way to adapt and survive that environment. Not everyone, but sometimes that's where it comes from. I know for sure that's where mine comes from. So a really good antidote to this is whenever you notice yourself doing it and you're either future tripping about the future, or maybe you're replaying something from the past, whether it's something positive or negative, you do the stop sign exercise. And what you do is you just pause, take a deep breath, look around you, and just start listing off everything you're grateful for and why. And just keep like looking at things. And then you close your eyes, and then you imagine a big red stop sign, and then you say the word stop out loud. And you open your eyes and you just keep doing it. And what happens is it's almost like squirrel. It takes your brain and your thinking onto another track. And the first few times you do this, you might be like, oh, it doesn't work. But if you do it over and over again, you'll notice you'll suddenly stop thinking about the original thing.
Yeah, it's so empowering because also people are unpredictable at the end of the day. You can't always predict like what the other person, particularly if you're just getting to know somebody, right? What they're going through in their lives.
Yeah.
Like they could pull the rug out from underneath the relationship or the encounter or the fling or whatever it is at any moment.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And so I think future tripping it's very dangerous.
Yeah. And it's not sexy. Being present is how you build connection, not creating projections and fantasies and judgments of people.
Yeah. What are some do you have any good first date ideas for people that don't drink alcohol?
Yes. So
is it lame to propose? Like, I feel like asking somebody to get a drink colloquially, that is like, let's kind of go. It sends a message that you want to go on a date with that person. But whether or not you drink alcohol, I mean, I'm not a big drinker, and I know many of my listeners are not necessarily big drinkers. So yeah, is it lame to propose something other than grabbing a drink for a first date?
No, it's actually clever, and I'll tell you why. There's something called priming/excitation transfer. And so what that explains is that there's a transference of the stimulus or the environment onto the person. So they've done some studies. Well, this famous one is on the Capilano Suspension Bridge, which is this very scary bridge. And they found that if you walked on that bridge, and you felt like a heightened nervous system because you were scared, or even if you watch a scary movie together, there's a transference where you transfer that excitement over to the person, and there was reported higher feelings of attraction towards that person. So what you want to do on a first date is, it's not coffee, it's not even a drink, it's not even a sit-down dinner. You want to do something which is activating, something that involves movement, something that involves some excitement.
Something potentially dangerous.
Yeah, go bungee jumping.
Yeah, go bungee jumping. I'm trying to think of what that might be like in Los Angeles. Go on a hike.
Yeah. Get the heart rate up.
Yeah.
And like, of course, we're not trying to manipulate anyone here, but yeah, like you going on a hike with someone, and it also takes the pressure off.
But my reservation with suggesting something like that is something that you would do with a friend. And so you're suggesting to somebody who you potentially see as somebody more than a friend to do something that you would otherwise do with a friend.
For sure. There's nothing wrong with that. You could also do a hike or something with like a little picnic and charcuterie at the end of it. Like you can add a twist to it.
And there's a way to put like a romantic twist on it, because my fear would be that it's like you're automatically placing yourself in effect in the friend zone by suggesting something that is so not classically romantic.
The activity is not what places someone in the friend zone, my friends.
Okay, good to know. I'm the amateur here. I'm trying to learn
like
from the
you
expert.
can go on a drink with someone, and because of either vibe, behavior, etc., still put them in a friend zone. Like it's not because of it's at a bar or it's on a hike.
Yeah, good to know. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Oh, so there is something I want to add to that, it's about what actually causes this dance of attraction. Do you want me to get into it?
Yeah, please.
So they've done these studies where they put cameras in these bars in London, and they wanted to see like who's making the first move, what are the cues, and I'm just going to ask you. So say a guy and a girl meet at a bar. Who do you think made the first move?
Typically the guy, right?
So actually, it was the woman.
Interesting.
And the reason why is because in this study, they recognize that the woman made an average of 13 indirect and direct glances before the man dared come over to speak to her. And what would happen is the man would make not an average of 19 space maximization movements before approaching. And this is all done unconsciously. They're not aware that they're doing it. So space maximization movements includes, making yourself really big, putting your arms on the back of the chair, maybe slapping their buddy's back to show where they are on the hierarchy of power, putting their hands right here, right by, their groin area. So they're doing an average of 19 of these while checking in to see if the person they're interested is looking. And if there's enough eye play, back and forth, and again, all subconscious, then the man will dare approach.
Damn, we're just like apes, huh?
We really are.
I swear to God, it's like wild.
But what's fascinating about that is a lot of the times you would think, oh, it's the most physically attractive person that gets approached the most. And in the study, they showed it's not. It's whoever was showing green lighting, who was showing open body gestures, because automatically when we are in a situation like that, we are sizing up, am I going to be rejected? And if a man senses, and a woman at all, there's a chance of rejection, and this is done in a millisecond, they will not approach.
What's the best way for a man to open with a woman? Like in that instance, right? Like the woman is making eye contact, but is she approaching the man, or is it still up to the man to approach and make the opening line?
So I don't think it's like up to a gender.
Yeah.
In that situation, the man would eventually go approach because he had enough signals that, okay, this person is safe.
Yeah.
They're not going to reject me.
Yeah.
And so at that point, like, you could just go up to them and like be normal. Don't come up with a line or like, it just makes you all weird, right? Just strike up a conversation with the person.
I love compliment. Like when I'm definitely no Rico Suave in this department. Like opening for me, like is not, I get like uncomfortable. I feel shy, but I think like what has in the past worked for me is complimenting something, not something that they were born with, but something that like they're wearing. Maybe you like their shoes or something.
Yeah, that's great, right? So you're not like, wow, you're so hot.
You're like, no, of course.
Wow, you have really good style. Like,
Yeah,
that shirt is like really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at you, Max. You know all the tricks.
I don't know. I would not say that. But no, your boy gets like, when I'm in that setting, like that bar setting, I can actually get pretty shy. I mean, I have like a ton of friends, lots of female friends, but when I'm actually, like when I'm at a bar and I see somebody that I'm actually attracted to, like when I get that like dopamine spike, that's when like the shyness creeps in.
Right.
And it's like that old friend that or not friend, that old, like, I wish I wasn't that way, but sometimes and it's not always super predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, but doing that has always helped, like that, just like complimenting. Cause it also like takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make the person that you're approaching self-conscious. It's really easy to, maybe you like sneakers or something and they're wearing like a cool, like, Adidas or whatever, something easy to compliment. Should women ever approach the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are no rules, but like, I feel like there is a stigma that approaching is something that is a role traditionally best suited for men.
So it's about energy. And what I mean is, if you are faking confidence by like playing games and all of that, people can feel it. Like, you might be able to trick someone long enough, but I used to play all these games. I'm like, I learned all the like body language, like all the hacks. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna, because I wasn't a confident human being. Like, I had low self-esteem. I thought that my value was if I looked absolutely perfect and I played this demure, like sexy, hot Asian girl. And like, it was all pretend to try and attract someone. And I might be able to get someone's attention, but it never went past a date or two or three. And I remember one of my girlfriends, her name is Linda. She could walk in a room and guy, girl, senior, or, whomever would be like, I'll do anything for you. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, what is it about this person? And whenever she liked someone, she would like let them know. She would talk to them at the bar. And I'm like, aren't you like afraid they're going to say no? Or don't you feel stupid? She's like, why? Like, if it's not them, then I'll move on. And it was just so fun and funny, but she was truly confident. So because of that, she didn't have to play any games. If she liked someone, she would let them know. And if they didn't feel the same way, she didn't turn that into a story about how she's defective or something's wrong with her. She's like, okay, fun. And then she'd go on to the next.
Where does confidence come from? And is there a way to boost your confidence?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely ways of boosting your confidence. I think it is deep inner work that happens through a series of choices you make on a daily basis. And it's everything from like, how are you respecting and caring for your body, your mind, your soul, from the food you eat to the friends you keep. Like, all of these things are connected. There isn't just reading the book on, dating hacks and that's going to make it work for you, because again, you can do the behavior but the energy isn't there. Something feels off. People can pick that inauthenticity up. So I think it's like working, like whether it's therapy, there's all these different things you need to do to look internally of what is it that's making you have certain beliefs that you're not worthy, you're not enough.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like confidence is also something that's very site specific. Like, people can be confident in work. People can be confident in with their fitness, for example, with their hobbies. They can be confident financially. They can be confident spiritual. I mean, there's all these different arenas in life where you can be confident, but also not as confident. So with regard to like dating, is there a way to, boost your confidence specifically in that arena?
So I would say it's actually not confidence you want to focus on, and it is a true acceptance of yourself. Because you could also learn how to be confident in dating. And that's what I mean. There's people who are very good at dating and really bad at relationships. And when you do the work, and it's not just one thing of accepting who you are, instead of hiding these parts of you that you're like, oh, that's going to be rejected, they're going to think it's weird, you start to embrace these sides of you that make you characteristically you. And what that will happen is that will filter out the masses, because that's not meant to be for you. And then the few people, whether they're friends or a romantic partner, who are desiring that, who want that, who think it's complimentary, will see that in you and be like, wow. And they're drawn to you for that very thing that either you or other people have judged you. And I'll give you an example. I have a client of mine. She's very loud. She's a big personality. And a lot of the times men would say, you're too much, you're too intense. So she would practice dialing that down and trying to be more in her feminine energy and learning all this stuff. And it just wasn't working. She was single for like 7 years.
Wow.
And she finally really went on a journey of doing the self-work and getting comfortable with who she is. And she's like, you know what? This is who I am. And if I have to be single because I'm authentically me, I'm fine with it. She ends up meeting a guy who's not her type, but she gave him a chance because she's like, I'm just gonna have fun, see how it goes. And this guy, he's an engineer. He's very quiet. He's introverted, and he loves that part of her.
Wow.
And when she's wild and she's loud, like, he looks at her with amazement versus judgment. She found the right match. But if she faked being this other person, she would have never connected with him.
Yeah, exactly. And also that's like a tough act to keep up when you're going through the motions of a real life relationship.
Yeah.
Like all your shit comes out.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the masculine feminine polarity is something that's really important, and it's become a bit almost like taboo to talk about today.
Yeah.
There's sort of like the overarching homogenization of all things. It's impossible to gender definitions and roles are becoming so like you can't even really talk about them these days. But it's such an such an important part of the relationship to have that polarity between like the masculine and feminine energy. And I don't think that's ever going to change.
Yeah, and I don't even think that I don't think it's gender specific, right? I think that you're flowing through like creative, open, receiving states and dominant, assertive states. Like you're constantly flowing through that, and you might have one that's a bit more predominant, or even what you've built habitually because of work. But I think that it's important that you recognize like what is your natural state at home versus your state because you have to be at work and you have to like bulldoze, and like, is that actually you? If that is, fine. But if it's not, and you have to kind of play a charade to succeed in work, then, and you keep doing that when you're in home, you're going to be attracting the wrong types of partners.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me about Breakup Bootcamp. So this is something that you do on an ongoing basis, right? You have these like these summits essentially. We take heartbroken people.
Yeah, so it's a 4-day retreat immersed in nature, and we bring in a team of experts from like psychologists, behavioral scientists. We even bring in a dominatrix who specializes in power dynamics.
Interesting.
And they're in sessions from like 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., different healing modalities. And we help people not just process the pain from the breakup, but also, you know, baggage that's added up, and most importantly, focus on the subconscious patterns that keep kicking around way before the ex. Because if you don't address and do a major pattern interrupt, you just keep repeating the same emotional experience, just with different people.
Yeah, and do you typically see men, women, both show up at your events?
Both men and women. I have more women than men, and I have found that, you know, the type of guy that's coming, it already is a certain, you know, openness, growth-oriented person. They're sharing, they're getting vulnerable. So I had in my last one, a guy cried. It was his first time crying in like 7 years.
Wow.
He had never even like grieved the death of a family member, like, and it came out, and like, it's a very safe environment. And after the boot camp, like multiple women are like hitting him up.
No way.
Yeah. Like the men that come, like they get an added service of like matchmaking.
I've heard that happens in like AA too. Like it's a tricky place to, you know, to people end up like dating and stuff because of the shared background or the shared trauma that they've experienced. You know, there's trauma bonding, I guess, that occurs. That's wild. Is it ever smart to get back with an ex? Does it ever work? Have you ever seen it work?
Yeah, I have seen it work. But before I give hope to all of you who are pining for your ex out there, if you're going to get back together with an ex, there has to be some new data point. You can't just go back together with your ex because you miss them and you feel lonely. And that's what happens with a lot of people is there's this major withdrawal stage where you're totally chemically imbalanced in the first 2 months after the breakup, and you get back together because emotionally you miss them versus it's a good decision for your future.
Got it.
So like if it was because you both lived on opposite sides of the country and someone moved, okay, that's a new data point. If they went to therapy and they learned a bunch of stuff and like something has shifted, that's a new data point. And so you can come back together. And what I would do is there should be some sort of a parameter to see like, is this actually working before you get too deep in and ingrained, and you realize it's the same relationship pattern, same problem all over again.
So yeah, so it doesn't. So you resist the temptation to jump back in at the deep end, i.e., where you left off, and make sure that you're taking the time to gather. I mean, maybe there are those new data points, but to see if you guys are to see if you as a couple are compatible given all the change. Because I mean, you're still the same people, but maybe in a way you're different as well.
Yeah, and I would say like a very safe kind of parameter is understand that the first 2 to 3 months after a breakup, you are literally withdrawal.
You're in withdrawal, yeah. You're like a drug addict.
Yeah, you're not making a sound decision for your future. You just need to get rid of the pain, and you think that connection will get rid of that. But then you create suffering for your future.
Yeah, so it sounds like if the break, like depending on how fresh the breakup is, getting back together doesn't make sense because you're probably just craving them out of that withdrawal need. But if there's been significant time, then that's I guess a more auspicious, that lends I guess, the relationship to a greater chance of success if
Yeah.
there's more time in between?
More time and an actual thing that has changed, right? You can't just be like after 3 months, like, well, I went to therapy and now it's different.
Yeah.
It's really hard for that change to stick. So, but if it's been, I don't know, 3 years and this person has gone on their journey and you have both done things along the way to like become more securely attached or more healthy, and you come back, that there is a possibility. And I would say in that parameter is like, okay, let's do a check-in every month and kind of see like what are the parameters that shows that this is working this time, and what's the kill list. Have a kill list. Even if you're single or if you're trying to get back together, what are those non-negotiables? What are the things that's going to make you say, this isn't working? Because we are so bombarded with the chemicals. It's natural. You're going to do what feels right for your heart, which might not necessarily be right for your future. So by having that listed out and being able to refer to that can help you during those moments when you are just riding on emotion.
So what is the kill list is basically a list of non-negotiables. And are you saying that we should establish those non-negotiables up front, or is that something that we should kind of do an inventory and keep to ourselves, but just be aware of when they arise?
So if you're single, I highly recommend writing down what your list of non-negotiables are. And it's going to be different for different people, right? If you are more into open, like you're not going to put monogamy as like it has to be. And right? But if you are like, I'm only into monogamous relationships, infidelity might be a non-negotiable for you. Like I know for me, drugs is one of my non-negotiables. Hard drugs, no, but psychedelics, totally fine, right? So it's going to be different. And you want to have that list because these are hard red no's. It's like, you don't justify them. And we do justify when we like someone. So when you have that, when you get into a relationship and someone crosses it, it's a no. Also, after a breakup, look at your non-negotiables list or write that down and then ask yourself, did my partner reach any of these? Because we also have like selective amnesia after a breakup to try to get us to get back together. And if you're like, a lot of my clients are like, wow, my ex actually hit like 3 of these. So you wouldn't choose that person today. So why would you keep pining to have them back in your life? You wouldn't choose this person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What happens if you're with somebody and you find out that in the past they had had an addiction to, say, alcohol or painkillers or something that like is not presently an issue, or at least they say that it's not a present issue, but they do cop to the fact that in the past it was there. I feel like that could be really scary.
Yeah, it can be scary. I don't think that there is a black and white answer. I think people can change. I think that a lot of people have addictions, and there's some addictions that are more socially acceptable, like work. It's like, it's just a different vice, but the reason why you're going to that to get the fix is the same. And there is a lot of judgment, but you have to just determine for yourself, like, do you trust yourself enough to be able to handle this? What happens if there's a relapse? And you might not have the emotional capacity. Maybe you're dealing with your own trauma and it's way too fresh. But maybe you do have the capacity and you are willing to take a risk to give it a chance.
I love that. How did you get into all this? I mean, I know that you had your own struggles, right? Like in relationship, but yeah, if you could just kind of like share your background a bit for my audience.
I just struggled with love my whole life since I've been a kid, and I couldn't understand it because I always had good friends. I did good in school. I always had great jobs, but every time, like with relationships, I was constantly heartbroken, pining over someone. And so I was like, okay, if I study it, learn the science, the psychology, all of the stuff, like maybe I won't struggle so much. So I became a relationship columnist about 15 years ago.
Wow.
And studied it. And then, eventually got into a relationship, thought he was my person. It ended due to infidelity and I fell apart. And all the research, it didn't help me because I never dealt with all of the wounds that I never dealt with. And that breakup was really the Band-Aid that ripped off. And I had to deal with, the love I didn't get from my father, like all of the stuff. And it really pushed me into this kind of healing journey. And when I, moved through the intensity of that pain, I was like, I have to use this to help people. The pain is not going to be in vain.
You think it's weird that we're not taught in school how to find and keep and maintain a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, we're taught like the
crazy.
Pythagorean theorem, right? But like, we're not taught anything about finances. We're not taught anything about how to have a healthy relationship. We're not taught anything about nutrition, how to cook for ourselves. Like
how to
nothing.
Communicate, how to
communicate.
express a limit, like how to draw a boundary. None of it.
Sex ed like is lacking. Yeah, so many areas of our education
nuts.
is lacking.
That's why podcasts like this is like so important, right? Like you are learning things that could literally save you years of suffering.
Yeah. Do you think we should be taught in school, like how to?
Yes.
I mean, it's so important.
How to live life.
Particularly if you come from a family, right? Like my parents didn't have the best relationship. Their relationship was actually pretty bad.
Right.
And this is something that I've had to learn, just on my own, like in a very boots on the ground, bespoke way, like what it means to be partnered with somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm single. Like I'm not in a relationship, but I didn't really have the best male role model growing up, and I certainly didn't have a model for what a healthy romantic companionate relationship looks like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you referenced like movies earlier, right? Like, I mean, a lot of my views of like what an ideal relationship should look like come from movies, and those are fake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But what happens is like when you're that young, right? Like you are absorbing all of these things, and then you're also we're very smart, brilliant creatures. We're learning how to adapt and survive.
Yeah.
So whatever you needed to do to survive an enmeshing parent or someone who's controlling or someone who made you feel like it wasn't safe to have sadness or that crying was weakness and it wasn't being a man. Like whatever you heard, you had to adapt, and you did brilliantly. And then you grow up with that adaptation, a maladaptive coping mechanism, and then it's causing havoc in your relationships. And I see this a lot with, there's a lot of talk on like avoidance. And I saw an article recently from The Atlantic that avoidant attachment is on the rise.
I have that. I said that like almost like I have a disease, but yeah, I feel like I have a pretty like avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, and I think that it's been pathologized as like avoidants are horrible, and because anxious care so much that like they're the victims of the avoidance. And like someone who's avoidant, it's not like they're logically like, you know what? I'm just going to manipulate the situation and pull away and make her feel like crap. It's not. There is this very quick reaction that intimacy is not safe, that it's going to control you. It's going to take away your freedom. So in a split second, there is a reaction, and a reaction that has been going on for years, decades. And so like if you don't understand that and you start doing the work to break it, you can continue pushing people away without understanding why. And then logically like, oh, it's because they're just not the one, right? You'll rationalize, you'll say something without realizing like, oh, these are ways I'm pushing away intimacy because deep down my nervous system is getting triggered and it's actually shutting down.
Wow. I think you're so right. It's that people think of that avoidant style as being like an offensive tactic when the reality is it's a defense.
Yeah.
It's a defense tactic.
Yeah.
The avoidant person is avoidant as a means of self-defense.
Yeah.
Like emotional self-defense.
Right. And so what the avoidant will do when triggered is they'll deactivate. And what the anxious will do when they're triggered is they will try to hyperactivate. So they'll like cling, they'll chase, they'll do whatever it is to reestablish connection, even if that means punishment or sparking a fight or doing something just to get to arise out of you, to be like, do you even care? Do you know what's going on here? And they're both ways of dealing with not feeling safe with intimacy. So they're two different sides of the same coin. So I really just like want us to not pathologize people's attachment styles. Yes, it is possible to become more secure. Yes, you could date someone who has a different attachment style, and like it doesn't have to be so black or white where you just cut people out because you're like, you're an avoidant, I'm out. Like you might have to do that if you're like, it's too fresh of a wound and it's going to, really break you down. But I have found, like, even in my own relationship, like, I veered very anxiously attached, codependent, love addict. I've done work to become more secure, but even in my relationship now, I'm secure with anxious tendencies. So, and my partner is secure with avoidant tendencies. And we've had to play and work and collaborate together, and it hasn't been perfect. And I could be like stuck to his hip, but I know he needs, his alone time, and he needs space. And if he's like pulling back and he's in a mood, it doesn't mean that it's my emotion to deal with. Like, I've had to learn all this. And because of this dynamic of growing through it together, we've both become more conscious. We've both evolved.
Wow. I love that. Does fighting in a relationship, we had a happiness expert, Arthur Brooks, on the show very recently. Yeah, he's amazing. And he was saying that he's madly in love with his wife, and yet they fight all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're a happiness expert and you're copying to the fact that you fight you're getting into fights all the time with your wife? And he was like, yeah, it's actually, if you don't have regular fights in a relationship, then it's like not, I can't quote him exactly, but he was like, it's like not an authentic relationship if you're not fighting, like if there are no fights. Like, makeup sex isn't just sex after the fight. It's a way, it's an experience of like deep intimacy.
Yeah. So I would love to add to that fighting is totally normal, and it is how you learn how to fight with your partner and learning how to repair after the fight. But there's definitely couples that fight and they don't repair, and they sweep things under the rug, and this low grade tension builds up until it explodes, and it's infidelity or it's rage or whatever it is. And no, I don't think that's healthy. But yes, fighting, and I don't think that there's like how many fights is healthy, how many is not. Regular arguing, they're two different people, two different histories, many different triggers. You come together, try to make a life together. Of course, you're gonna bump heads, and the important thing is that you learn how to repair, and then you get deeper in intimacy. That's intimacy. Like, we think in North America, intimacy is sex and orgasm and penetration. It's not. Intimacy is like feeling something, feeling a little insecure to share it with your partner because you'll be judged, but having that hard conversation anyway and moving through it together. That is intimacy.
Yeah, I love that. There's and would you say that it's smart to, I think one of the ways to get in front of conflicts in the relationship is to not let things fester and to address them as they arise, and to, you use the metaphor of like sweeping them under the rug. So without turning a relationship into a minefield of emotional neediness, would you say it's a smart idea generally to kind of bring things up as they arise and to like have that be sort of an ongoing, ever-present dialogue in the relationship?
Yes, and part of you building your own emotional intelligence is to know which things can you sort out on your own and which things need to be attended to and negotiated and talked about. Because I know for me, every time something came up, I would say something about it. And what I learned was like this thing that I'm like, he was a bit moody today, and that like really bothered me because that affected my mood. Like, I don't have to say everything. Like, I didn't like the way our anniversary was planned, wasn't planned the way that I wanted it. And I was like, I gotta say something. And I was like fuming. And then a few days passed, and I was like, recognized all the different ways my partner shows me love in his way. And that whole like energy of like, oh, he didn't do it this way. I wanted it as a surprise. Why did he ask me the question? Like, all it just went away. I sorted it out on myself, right? So you got to learn, I guess, what battles to choose, and also understand, like, I call it, there's always a shit bucket, okay? Right? So this totally not scientific, but it may change your life. In every relationship, there's a shit bucket.
Okay.
And 20% is shit. There are things that annoy you, different love languages, the fact that they're extroverted, you're introvert, whatever it is. And this pile of shit's going to exist. So there's a point where you just have to decide, like, there's enough good here, and I can tolerate this 20% shit bucket, and know that by just swinging from branch to branch that, oh, but this person is probably more extroverted that would, connect with mine. Like, there'll just be another pile of shit. That bucket is going to just have a different flavor of shit. And so you also have to know if it's more than 20% and it's like 40 or 50, okay, there's a problem. But if you know that there's 20%, instead of everything being this existential crisis where you're, debating if you should be together, like, you accept it. And it doesn't mean you don't have conversations about things that are really like, hard. But you just don't have all these crazy expectations that they're going to be like you.
Yeah. And also the other person does. I feel like if you bring up every little thing, it makes the other person feel like they're constantly being criticized.
Totally. Yeah.
And that is like not a good way to feel.
Yeah. And I have noticed, I've done some research that for avoidance, there is a lot of guilt. And there is this feeling of like, I'm not good enough. So the complaint can be seen as a direct criticism on how, and internalized as, I'm not good enough. Whereas anxious attachment, sometimes they can keep doing the picking and the picking because it feels like then there's connection. There's a rise and like, oh, like I'm getting some sort of a rise and connection here. And you might be doing it without knowing. And I know I used to do that. I would just be like, there's this and there's this. And without knowing, I was like doing this to like kind of soothe my own anxious attachment.
That makes total sense. Yeah. I mean, I experienced that in a prior relationship where it would be like 80 to 90% good, but then I would feel constantly criticized for small things, but they would instantly take me out of the moment, and I would feel like attacked, and then I would feel compelled to retract, and it would give me the sense of like invalidation for everything that had occurred prior in the relationship.
Yeah.
Like for as quote unquote good as I've been, or it's been, being criticized in that moment made me feel like, like everything was just like undone or I guess worthless, pointless, irrelevant in that moment.
Yeah. And the next level skill is looking at the unmet need behind the complaint, because it's never about the flowers or the dishes. And a lot of the times we are troubleshooting the wrong thing. And even that person who was like, it's this, and you're doing this, and you're doing this now. And you're like, okay, I'll fix this, and I'll fix that. And you're like, what? But she's still complaining because it was never about that symptom, right? So what is the root? Is it connection? Is it, deep intimacy? And addressing that so you can actually, solve the thing that's going on versus like whack-a-mole of this symptom and this symptom.
Yeah. What if you're with somebody that constantly feels invisible, even though you know that they're not, that they're not invisible to you, and you go out of your way to make them feel not invisible, but still if they're talking to you and you happen to like take out your phone, it kind of harks back to them. It triggers some kind of deep-seated emotional vulnerability. It's like hitting a nerve, in that moment, which is obviously understandable, perhaps for that person given their background, but doesn't typically lend itself to the easiest relationship, right? Because like attention is pulled in a bajillion different ways today.
Yeah, and I think that you have to be have judgment of what is a reasonable request and what is you just trying to patch up someone's own trauma and wounds.
Yeah.
Right? Because, for example, if someone has an inherent belief, I'm not safe, and you do whatever you can, like you're consistent in calling and seeing them and things like that, and nothing you do helps because it's a bottomless pit, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
But if, they're like, I don't feel safe because you leave for a week and you don't respond to messages, like, yeah, that's reasonable that they feel that way.
Right. Yeah, if you're gone for a week and you're like, and you've ghosted them essentially, then yeah, obviously that makes sense. But if you're like sitting across the table from somebody and you happen to pick up your phone, that's not necessarily the thing that needs to be called out and criticized, right?
Yeah, and I think with that's more of a conversation, maybe not even in the moment, which is like afterwards, be like, hey, like I know like you felt like upset when I picked up my phone, and I sometimes have business things, so like knowing that like there's times where I'm gonna pick it up, like like how about dinners? We don't, but like breakfast and lunch, like it's okay. Like, is that a comfortable meeting ground?
Yeah, I think that's totally great to be able to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because we do live, it's 2023, right? I mean, we don't have this, we're not living in this traditional world where there aren't a bajillion different things pulling at our attention. And modern life asks of us to give our attention to those things. A lot of us like have jobs, not me, but many people have jobs where they're expected by their employers to be available, unfortunately, 24/7.
Yeah.
And so we need to have like grace and compassion given the times that we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super, super, super important. I'm I don't have anything going on at the moment, but I definitely like every time I get to chat with you, I feel like I learn so much and I feel so excited to like bring it forth into the new whatever, situation.
So let's go back to you.
Yeah.
So last time I was on here, I don't know, it was like 2 years ago, you're single and you were saying that sometimes you're like looking for that movie moment where you'll like lock eyes. And so like, how's that all going for you?
How's it all going for me? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do I say? I don't know. I feel like my dating life is good. I'm not saying that, and by good, I don't mean that it's like hyperactive or anything like that. I just feel like I'm very content and I have priorities other than dating. So I'm very drawn to my work, obviously, and I have a pretty rich family life.
What do you want? So if we were to have another podcast interview a year from now today, what would be that like ideal like situation for you?
I mean, I think it would be nice to be in a relationship with somebody, to have like an ongoing partnership with somebody that I'm madly attracted to, that I have a crush on. I know crush sounds very juvenile, but I like that. I love that. I long for that feeling. Somebody with whom I have really strong physical chemistry.
Okay, so you just emphasize chemistry like 3 different points. It's the same thing. So okay.
I mean, I like chemistry. What can I say?
Totally fine. And what else? Because you can get sex. Like I don't think that's hard for you.
No,
so
sex is.
What else?
What else? Somebody that. Well, I'm pretty independent also, which is like, I guess, a blessing and a curse. So somebody that respects my desire to be independent.
Okay.
Somebody that I feel that I don't have to like necessarily check in with all the time. So somebody who's not necessarily somebody who's avoidant, but also I don't know how well I would fare with somebody who's like has a very anxious attachment style.
Yeah. So what do you want to, so your life is amazing. You can have sex when you want, you have good friends, you have a good family. So what would a relationship add to your life?
I don't know. I mean, somebody to travel with and like, a companion, somebody who I like the feeling of infatuation too, so I want that, but that only, that only lasts 12 to 18 months, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe, I don't know, somebody who I just feel like, somebody who I'm very attracted to, somebody who gets me, somebody who shares my values, somebody who I can travel with. I don't know.
What would you want to build with this person?
But I think part of my problem is that I don't necessarily like, it's hard for me to define because I feel like it's difficult to define what I want because I need so little. Mm-hmm. Like I already have so much of what I want. Mm-hmm. Like I can pull a travel companion out of my current life if that's what I need, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can travel with one of my brothers. Yeah. I could travel with my assistant, who we do often travel a lot because I I tend to prefer work travel. And you know, I can get laid when I want to. So it's like a problem of, it's like an issue in the sense that I don't have any real dire motivation to have like one of these relationships. So I feel like when I do have one, it's just got to be amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be somebody who's like amazing, because my life is already really great.
Yeah.
You know, if it's somebody who adds drama to my life, then I just don't need that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're not looking at relationships coming from a place of deficit, right? Which is,
right.
Unfortunately, a lot of people come from like, there's something not whole in their life, or they want a lifestyle, or they want to feel safe, and this external person's going to give it to me, and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have a very full life, and maybe something that you can't logically talk about because you don't really know, and it's more of a felt sense, is like something that happens is like a deeper level of intimacy where someone who does see you for you and is, instead of trying to like, I need all your time, I need, like, wow, like you're this person creating and building, and I love that, and that's what's sexy about you, and like can be by your side while also holding their own and doing their thing, and like the two of you become like a bigger and more like a bigger force than just you alone.
Yeah.
It sounds like that could be the compelling thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's I do ultimately, I think, want to have like a family. And so I recognize that like how that my situation is not, it's not like ideal in the sense that like it's not, it doesn't easily lend itself towards what I ultimately want, which is the family. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that I grew up very close to my mom in a really, in a relationship where I almost had like too much love from my mom. And it's kind of made it, it's like made it difficult for me to, I've talked about this before on the show in the past. It's made it difficult for me to bond like emotionally. Like I don't have that necessity the way that I think many other people do. And so my relationships in the past have been typically defined by me just basically very transactional, me wanting sex in a very honest and obviously consensual way, like that kind of intimacy, but nothing really like more like long-term or involved in that.
It's hard to, when it is like transactional or like an ego transaction, right? Like I'm hot, you're hot, or you're hot, I'm rich, or whatever that dynamic, that exchange is, for that to create bonding. And so, there's a difference between an ego connection and an ego transaction and a soul connection. And like a soul connection is when you really like let someone see you, even like the parts of you that you're a little self-conscious of, like your scars, your wounds, like things that maybe some of your close friends know, but maybe not even to like this deep level. And they see you and they actually love you even more for those things. And it does create like, it shifts your sense of safety. We're like, oh, I could actually really be me and seen and loved for that, and not loved just because I'm a good-looking white tall guy who's successful, right? Because a lot of people are drawn to you for that. And I think that also with some of the women, when they're drawn to you because of these, universally attractive, okay, tick, 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 there is no chance for there to be a bond. They're transacting with you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've only had one major relationship in my life, and I've had like lots of more minor relationships that were nonetheless valuable, and have yielded some very valuable ongoing relationships as well. Not necessarily intimate relationships, but like I stay friends with the vast majority of women that I romantically interact with, and I very much value those relationships. But yeah, I've only had like one serious relationship. That was like an on and off again relationship that lasted a very long time. But even with that person, I found it very difficult to commit due to a lot of things, but also due to my own sort of difficulty with pair bonding, I suppose. There's a great book that I highly recommend that people read. This is way more common, I think, than anybody really gives it credit for, but this sort of emotional enmeshment that is sometimes referred to as covert incest, which sounds way worse. It has nothing to do with sex, but it's like when a parent basically makes you their surrogate partner.
Yeah.
And I'm very confident that that's what happened to me, pretty much, because I was extremely close to my mom. She was the most important person in my life, and I'll love my mom, until my dying breath. She was an amazing, amazing mom, but she also shared some shit with me that she shouldn't have about her relationship, and she was very emotionally needy. And at a time when she had nobody else to share, to offload this stuff with, she offloaded it to her 12-year-old son, and so it created this difficult kind of thing for me, I think.
For sure. I mean, instead of you being the child, you become a therapist, a best friend, and all these things, these roles that a 12-year-old child is not supposed to have. And so that does impact you. And there may be like this very like quick intrinsic, like subconscious thing of like intimacy isn't safe. Like I had to be this thing for my mother. Like I had to take on this responsibility, and that hurts. There's pain there, even if you don't remember pain or anything like that. And so, that could be a part of why when there's a chance of someone getting too close, you might, deactivate, or you might choose people where like deep down, will never, move past a certain level of intimacy, because then you'll never have to repeat what happened.
Yeah. I mean, I like, I typically, I'm attracted to women who objectively from the outside, you would not think would be healthy, for me. But that's who I tend to be like drawn to, So it's a journey. But I'm grateful that I have you in my corner, so that every couple of months I can have you back and vent to you and commiserate, or not commiserate, but at least share my struggles with, and at least get some semblance of insight. It's super fun. So what's next for you? I know you're always doing these events.
Yeah. So I have a breakup boot camp happening in Sonoma. I'm launching my own podcast.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's called Breakup Boot Camp. It's 7 episodes, and each episode is on each stage of the breakup process. And then at the end of it, I live coach someone who's going through that stage. So, yeah.
So cool. Yeah. Super, super fun. Well, this was dope. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.